Welcome to Coastal Voices, the show that brings you stories about life on Hatteras Island. This is Susan West, your host for the evening. The stories you'll hear tonight capture the spirit of people from Rodanthe to Hatteras Village. The storytellers come from all walks of life, and topics include everything from childhood memories to fish tales, community traditions to big storms, hard work to daring adventures. The stories are from recordings collected by local volunteers in the Coastal Voices Oral History Project. You'll meet some of those volunteers in the show tonight. To learn more about the project, please visit our website at carolinacoastalvoices.com.
This is Liz Browning Fox. I interviewed my uncle about an event he witnessed that took place here in Buxton on Hatteras Island back in 1962. He is retired U.S. Coast Guardsman William Shoemaker. Equipment and a technique were developed in the 1800s by the U.S. Life-Saving Service to rescue people from ships wrecked offshore. Hatteras Island is now the only place where you may find a live demonstration of this equipment. The resourceful Coast Guard at Cape Hatteras Group used the vintage life-saving equipment to accomplish a completely different objective.
Well, I forget what was the date on the Ash Wednesday storm, the 61 or 62, something like that. That's when the storm washed an inlet, one of many, between Canadian Hole and the north end of Buxton. Washed out like all the rest. It was very much of an inconvenience. Inconvenience then as to now would be a great big difference. Back in those days we had naturally the power, mail, telephone service. That was about it. There wasn't that much coming down the beach at the time, but the road had washed out, so it was a major inconvenience to the people on this end of the washout. Coast Guard, working out of the Buxton station, which is now Park Service headquarters for the island. We had a beach cart there, the old-time beach cart that they used to use when sailing vessels or whatever vessels were come ashore, that employed the Lyle gun, where they would fire a line out to the vessel, and by means of attaching lines and a breeches buoy, they'd bring people ashore and save lives. Well, we had one at the station at which we did drill with. Everybody was fairly proficient. So they had the idea, the phone system was out, we had the idea, let's fire a line across there, and by pulling back and forth, we'd get the telephone line across the inlet and at least get communications established. Sounded like a good idea. So the people from Oregon Inlet Station come down to the north end of the inlet, which is around, I said Canadian Hole, it's around the haul over at that time, is now called Canadian Hole. But we were on the south side. We had the beach cart, so we set it up to fire the line across so they can pull the telephone wire. Well, these Lyle guns were capable of firing a 16-pound weight a fairly good distance, depending on how much black powder was put into the Lyle gun itself. It come in 2-ounce packages of rough powder, black powder, and you would put a package of this down the barrel and then put the weight in there, attach a line, and fire it, depending on how far the distance was, you know, how many packs of gunpowder you'd put in there. Well, the group commander, more or less in charge of the entire operation, we set the Lyle gun up, and he figured by eye how far it was across there, and he figured that it would probably take 2 packages of powder to get the weight across the inlet. And he walked off talking to somebody about what was going on, and the chief that was at the station at the time, he also looked at the distance and figured, well, probably 2 packages of powder would do it, not knowing that the group commander had already put two packages in there. group commander come back after the chief had done that and said, well, it is a little bit further than I thought. Maybe I should maybe put another pack in there. Well, now there was five packages of black powder in there. They had walkie-talkies and told the north end, said, okay, we're fixing to fire. Y'all take cover and let us know where the weight goes. So we lit that thing off. And they called on the walkie-talkie, said, well, do you see it? They said, yes, we do. Said the last time we saw it, it was skipping across the off bar way out in the ocean. Said there was a little bit too much power behind it and she was gone. So they redid everything and we the next shot was a little not quite as powerful. Got the line across and eventually got the telephone line across. The inlet itself was very powerful. It was a lot of tide running through there. I remember they got all the old wrecked cars on this end of the island from Buxton and Hatteras, and they were going to try and fill the inlet up. And they would take them up there with the wreckers and put them in the inlet, and they would just disappear. There was so much tide going through there. Eventually, it did fill up, but it was one of the times on the island that the local people, well, you know, this is just one more thing. And living out here, it happens. We handle it, and everything was go back to normal. And that was the Lyle gun firing across there for establish a telephone line. It worked.
Dallas Miller and his wife Lois own Country Elegance in Avon. In a Coastal Voices interview, Dallas talks about entertainment for young people on Hatteras Island in the 1950s and 60s. Did you play any sports in school?
The only sports we had at school was basketball. That was it.
No baseball?
No baseball. No nothing. And in basketball, we were not allowed to be in a conference because we had to take ferries. And the basketball court was not large enough. It wasn't a regulation-sized basketball court. I think that's what it was. And between the basketball court and the side of the building, you didn't have any room. It had one row of chairs around it. Because the basketball court was the auditorium.
Okay.
And so the only teams that we ever played was you played the Coast Guard and played the Navy. And that was about it. Now the villages, you know, most of them had baseball teams. Yeah, I played on baseball here at Avon, and we would play the Navy and the Coast Guard mostly. You know, sometimes other villages, and sometimes we'd play among ourselves. But I can remember playing where when you turn at the stoplight to go into Avon, on the left-hand side, the little fish market that's there, there used to be a ball field.
Oh, it was?
Or we had it as our ball field. Had a backstop.
Okay.
We kept it cut. And but I can remember playing there. And I can remember playing, and my dad playing there at the same time. And I thought, you know, I don't know how he's playing. He's 40-some years old. Yeah, we were the Blue Devils when I went through.
You were the Blue Devils.
Yeah, now
okay.
they're now the Hurricanes.
Right.
I was going through some things that my mom had packed away up in the attic, and I came across this little banner, maybe 6 or 8 inches, and it had Cape Hatteras Bulldogs, 1953. Well, that was the year my brother graduated. So I'm guessing they were called the Bulldogs then.
But you were the Blue Devils.
Blue Devils, yeah.
Okay.
I still got my school coat. I didn't know it. My mom had it in the attic.
Did you have television here when you were growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, we had it, and but you had to have an outside antenna. And you only got like 2 stations or 3 stations that I recall. To get one station out of Norfolk, your antenna had to point one way. To get the station out of Washington, Little Washington, it had to point another way. To change the station, you had to go outside and turn your antenna and open a window and say, okay, a little bit more, a little bit, okay, that's good right there. You know, and then they finally got little remotes, and you would turn that and it would turn your antenna. We never had one. I remember my
Okay.
aunt had one. You know, we just had the old pump pipe where we had a pipe wrench on it. Turned it with that pipe wrench until Dad says, that's good.
Uh-huh. When you were in high school, where did you hang out?
Most of the time, Sonny's Restaurant in Hatteras. Okay, at that time it was Fraser Peel's restaurant.
Okay.
In the back of that was a section that had booths back there. That's where most of the teenagers would hang out.
Okay.
Before that, it was when I was growing up. It was in Avon, the shop that Lois has now. It was there. Andrew Meekins built that store. We just called it Andrew's Place. It had a jukebox, 3 wooden booths, and had a shuffleboard and a little open place in the middle for dancing. We used to always hang out there.
Did they sell sodas
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Beer too?
No,
or- No.
It was dry.
Okay.
Yeah. No, just just Pepsis, Cokes, stuff
Uh-huh.
like that, a bar of candy, bag of peanuts. That's about it. Right down the street was Pritchard's, and Pritchard's was a little pool hall.
Okay.
Had 1 pool table. When I first went in there, you had to have a note from your parents saying it's okay for you to shoot pool.
Okay.
Because some of the religions did not want you shooting pool.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I had to take a note in there from my mom. So it was okay for me to shoot pool. If you played a game of 8-ball, it was a nickel. If you played a game of rotation, it was a dime. And that's all we played back then most of the time, was just those 2 games.
So those were the 2 hot spots.
Yeah, that's where
And when you got a little older for dating girls and all.
It was at Hatteras.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a movie theater on the island back
Yeah,
then?
there was one at Hatteras.
Okay.
And we would go to that. It's right across from where the library is.
Okay.
It's
A.S. Austin.
Austin, right next to Austin's used to be a store.
Okay.
Was the movie theater. Tandy's Place, which is the quarterdeck restaurant now.
Okay.
That was the hot spot. That was the
It
place
was.
when they finally got liquor back. You know, that you went and you bought your beer, and you just went down there on Saturday nights to watch people fight.
Uh-huh.
You know, it was great.
Okay. Mike Scott of Buxton moved to Hatteras Island in 1970. In an interview with Susan West, Mike talks about moving to the island, going to school here, and about surfing.
I spent a fair amount of the summer of '69 here, not
Okay.
working, just I'd saved up a little bit of money. You could live pretty cheap in the campground. And then the summer of 1970, I came right after my sister graduated from high school. I came June 4th in 1970, and I never planned to stay, and I might not, but I'm still here.
Okay.
I had a friend who I went to school with in Virginia who had family in Rodanthe. So I came to Rodanthe and I worked in a restaurant. I washed dishes.
Do you remember how much you got paid?
Gee, probably 50 cents an hour or something. It wasn't much. 60 cents an hour, not much.
Okay.
But sufficient to get by. And I rented a little bedroom. I had a little shared efficiency. I look back, I don't know how I did it, but I got by. My buddies in Rodanthe there, Urban Midget and Asa Gray and Gary O'Neill, they said, don't go back, stay here, go to school here. Of course, that sounded great to me.
Uh-huh.
And believe it or not, Melly Edwards took me to Buxton, signed me up for school, and that's what I did.
Wait, the postmaster
His
took
wife, the postmaster's
his wife. So did you stay living in
I
your
stayed
little
there
apartment?
until I could endure that bus ride no more. The bus would only go about 40 miles an hour, and it was a long ride, and that
Yeah.
cut into my surfing time or working time.
Right.
And then a friend from Virginia, who you may know, Rob Fincham, he got wind of what I was doing, and he said, I got to do that too. And he moved down and signed up for school. And he lived in Rodanthe, he rented a room, same place I did, for about 2 weeks. He said, man, we got to do something. This bus ride's killing us. So now I had an ally,
Right.
and we found a house in Buxton to rent, and we moved to Buxton.
And then how did you pay for it? Were you
I just worked, lived frugal,
Uh-huh.
ate a lot of cream of wheat and oatmeal, and I don't know how to survive. I don't know how to do it. But yeah, I don't think I ever had more than enough money to last for 3 or 4 days, but I always had enough to get by.
Was the reason that you decided to stay here Was it primarily surfing?
Well, when I moved from Florida to Virginia, I loved it in Florida. I had a great situation there. It's kind of rural where we lived, and I just love Florida. And we moved to Virginia in February, probably during a particularly cold time. I didn't know cold weather. I thought it was inhumane what we had in here. Of course, that's ridiculous. People live in a lot colder areas than that. So, yeah, I came here to go surfing. I was just young and dumb, and all I wanted to do was surf. But I think I just liked it better here.
How did you find a house to rent?
Grapevine. You know, I was going to school, so I had a little bit of info there.
Uh-huh.
Actually, the house belonged to Noe Price in Avon. The house was in Buxton, about a quarter mile from the school. It was an old house. It was empty. They were happy to have somebody in it. Didn't have suitable heat, really. Didn't have a water heater. It was pretty primitive. But it didn't leak when it rained inside. We did manage to get one stove going. Yeah, young and dumb, don't know no better. I mean, I came from a stable home. Al Burris was our surfing buddy.
Okay.
Yeah, and Grant Jeanette.
Okay.
Yeah, they were all really into it. And to a lesser extent, Gary Bowers, too.
Okay.
And then in time, Gary's younger brothers, too. But Dal and Don, we spent a lot of time together, on land and in the water. Yeah.
So, did you have interaction with these folks, with their families?
Yes, especially Dal's, his poor mother.
Millie?
She kept us alive, fed us. And,
She did?
yeah. Tell you something else with that family. It was a great pit stop. Do you remember where? You remember where they used to live, right there?
Right.
Oh, so nice. We would leave our surfboards there. We just stash them. I mean, it was a bicycle for us. I mean,
Okay.
the bicycle was the mode of transportation. It was really all we needed. We marvel at how we survived because I didn't have much time to work. I did make money working in the school. There was a program for underprivileged people. I don't know what you called it, but anyway, I did janitorial work at the school during school, and actually had a summer job there too. But in the summer, there's plenty of work anywhere you wanted to go. We were living pretty frugal, so no car, no gas, no insurance, no telephone, no
Right.
TV.
Right.
Yeah, so if I could get a couple 5 hours a week to work, I had money to spare. But anyway, back to Millie and Calvin. They're just such good people to us, and the whole Burris family was into surfing. And another thing we would do occasionally, if we knew the surf was going to be good the next day, we'd just stick the boards in the bushes right there behind the motels. That's primarily where we surf, because the lighthouse area tend to be a little crowded. And most folks, only local folks, surf behind the motels, behind the cabins, they used to say. We're going surfing behind the cabins.
Okay.
Because I guess originally Edgar Hooper's family, his mother and father, and Carol Dillon and her sister, they all built what were considered cabins.
Cheryl Gray McDonald was born in Avon. She shares memories about her mother, the artist affectionately known as Mama Carey, learning to paint.
It was kind of a mixed thing with her. She was kind of timid and shy, but yet she was very adventurous.
She was.
She was. And she just was one of these people that had that twinkle in her eye. She loved new and unusual things, and she would like to try things. But
Do you remember when she started painting?
I sure do. It was it was the late 60s, because I was still in high school, and I believe I was about in the 10th grade, and they had an evening class there in oil painting, and so my mother talked me into going down there with her. She wanted to learn to paint. She wanted me to learn to paint, too.
Okay.
She was interested in having her kids learn to do different things, so she signed both of us up, and we went down there in the evenings, and it was her first experience at oil painting, and of course mine too. And so she painted, for a few years using oils. She painted some beach scenes, and she loved painting flowers. She had done, quite a few flowers, kind of like what she wound up doing with the watercolor. She learned watercolor later. My nephew's wife, Denise, she had learned to do watercolor, and she kind of taught my mother some of the, watercolor techniques. And my mother developed her own style, but she pretty much encouraged her to use the watercolor.
And how would you describe your mother's style of painting? Realistic or impressionistic, or
I think it has kind of almost a folk art appeal to it, a more impressionistic. I wouldn't call it realistic at all, but I think it's got kind of whimsical, light freestyle.
Were there many other artists in Avon at the time when she took up painting?
Well, there were a couple. I remember Miss Ina Scarborough. She used to paint.
Okay.
And my mother would, talk about her painting. And also Brooksy Cole, her maiden name was Brooksy Meekins. Her sister Lola Meekins lived here for all her life. She lived to be almost 100 years old, I believe, 98 or so. But Brooksy lives up in Elizabeth City, and she is a very good artist.
So there was a little community of women artists.
And there could have been other people who painted too around here. I hung around with them some, or was friends with them.
Do you have any idea of the first time your mom sold a piece of art?
It was probably when my sister Libby had the Gaskins Gallery. Libby and Denise, had the gallery together. And it was probably
so pretty late then. I mean, she had been
it was
painting.
When the gallery had come along.
Okay.
Yes, but she had done predominantly more oils earlier on.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say she didn't do hundreds or anything like that, but she did paint. She enjoyed it. She always wanted to be an artist.
Any idea what your mom liked about being an artist?
Well, I think it was kind of a creative outlet for her. There wasn't a whole lot down here, at the time for a person to do something different, I guess. And I guess she was kind of attracted to the artwork. One, because I think she liked flowers a lot and she liked nature, so she kind of wanted to replicate that. And number two, she had a great uncle who was an artist up in New York, and apparently he was a very good artist from what she told me.
Okay.
She didn't remember him that well because he had passed away when she was very, very young.
Okay.
But she remembered, some of the artwork that my great-grandmother up there had.
In a Coastal Voices interview, Jeff Aiken tells us about his start in seafood wholesaling and development of Jeffrey Seafood in Hatteras Village.
David Price. I commercial fished with David, and David taught me how to twist wire and rig baits, and I got a job on a charter boat with Ivy Batten, and I kind of cut my teeth with that, and I continued commercial fishing and charter fishing. I got a captain's license in 1987. I guess before that, I got a real estate license. I got a real estate license, and I sold real estate for a midget for a number of years. Until I just, they put the water moratorium, and they could date that, and then the building moratorium simultaneously.
Right.
That was like the two or 3 months after I got my license.
Okay.
So I went back to fishing.
Charter boat or commercial?
Both. Yeah,
Okay.
we would take the Captain Squid. I've put over 100 boxes of sow trout on the Captain Squid. We had a net reel on the Captain Squid. Then David had another boat, the Big 'Un. We had grown up in Hampton. We had friends in the fish business in Hampton. So we just decided we'd do a joint venture. We bought her with the help of John Coleman, who owned Hatteras Harbor Marina, who created Hatteras Harbor Marina really from nothing. He built the building and did all of that stuff and created Hatteras Harbor. And so since we had the squid belonged to him, he was kind of backing us, and we were friends, and he helped us buy a cold plate Mercedes refrigerated truck, and we hung a scale on the back of it, and when we got home, we packed fish. We'd go fishing all day. We'd come home and pack fish in the parking lot until the wee hours of the morning, and we'd hire a driver to take them to Virginia. And that's how I got started in the fish business. I continued to do that, and John Coleman and John offered to build me the building that is now where we clean the fish, the other Jeffrey Seafood, the west at Hatteras Harbor. And we built that together.
And what year was that?
That was 88. Yeah, that was 88. So we built that, and that's when I really started buying fish from other boats. And that's when it became Jeffrey Seafood, not just Jeff and David selling fish.
You had that facility. When did you expand and start buying at the other?
Quality Seafood is where I worked at Quality Seafood.
Okay.
I worked for $5 an hour, was happy to have it, and all the fish I could eat. So a lot of folks left vegetables on our front porch, and You know, I had my first drumfish stew. It was Miss Alice made it, Miss Alice Gray. Some memorable days back then when I first came to Hatteras. But yeah, I worked there for $5 an hour. So that would have been in the early 80s. And then by 88, I had the fish house at Hatteras Harbor. And then Quality left their lease over there. And Michael Peel approached me about would I be interested in leasing that fish house from him. And I did. And then a couple of years later, I bought the property adjacent. So I still lease.
And you bought that from Michael's uncle?
Uncle Lee Peel.
Okay.
Who was really responsible for putting the fish house there, and Lee was the big time fisherman.
Do you know why Quality moved out of there? They decided to give up that lease?
I never heard anybody really tell me, you know, in their own words why, but I think they gave up the lease because it just wasn't economically viable to them. They were in the crab business in a big way back then.
That's right.
And I don't think crabbing has ever been the same. I don't know why it was better back then, but the high salinity of our crab waters here lead to mortality sooner. And
right.
I never made any money buying crabs much, you know, except certain times of year with basket markets. But they had picking houses and that type of thing up in Elizabeth City. They would pick and process crabs too. So they had plenty of other things to do, and they, for whatever reason, decided to move out of Hatteras.
Commercial fisherman Michael Peel of Hatteras talks about his first fishing job in an interview with Susan West. Do you remember the first time you went commercial fishing and got paid for fishing?
I was just out of high school. I was fishing on the beach with my uncle. We was rock fishing.
Do you remember how big that crew was?
It was me and Barry, probably 5 people.
With like 2 trucks on the beach?
You'd set it and you'd pull it in.
Okay.
And when we got the rock, like one time we caught 800 boxes on Cape Point. We pulled them.
Oh my gosh.
Stacked them up on Cape Point.
Wow.
And the fish bars would come from, like, it was Dolan and Donald and all them would come down and bid on them to get them.
Oh, they would come to the beach?
Because they wanted to fish.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But, I mean, we'd be taking them by truckloads to a certain Dolan Jr. to a fish house, and Danny Oden would come down and say, I'll give you 45 cents for them. And,
how many fish houses do you think there were back then?
Then there was, we had one here, Quality. Donald had one.
Donald Oden.
And Dolan had one.
Dolan Gaskell. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was top dollar.
Top dollar.
Okay. So, so they came right to the beach because they wanted the fish.
They reminded me of the movies you watch, the old cattle bar, you know, when they come in with cattle drivers. The different beef cattle bars would try to get out there first to get the first bid on the cattle.
Did you continue to work with Lee?
I did, till he died. Okay. Me and him started a company, and I fished with him right on.
Okay.
I was, I think I was 17 years old. I was paid $500 for my shower to fish, and I'd stay on the beach all night with it. To hold the haul.
Hold the haul.
Yeah, what you do, if you slept where you wanted to haul at in the truck, then the next day it was your first set.
Oh, that was your location.
That was your location.
That was your spot.
And you might come down there and stay there too. And after I set, then it was your turn to set.
Okay.
But if I left, then it would become your set.
Okay.
Just taking turns.
In a Coastal Voices interview, Cheryl Gray McDonald recalls the good-natured ribbing that took place among students at Cape Hatteras School in the 1960s.
The people in Buxton and Hatteras used to call us Kenneck eaters, Yopon eaters. And we'd pretend we were angry, but we really thought it was just fun. All in fun. And we call the people in Buxton sea-ticks.
Sea-ticks?
Yes. And we joked the people in Hatteras about their low land. Can you imagine that? Us?
Coastal Voices thanks the storytellers, the community oral historians, and Radio Hatteras for their support. And we thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.